Everyone thought Ion was lucky. That's what they said every time they saw him and Sarah together, at family dinners, weddings, or casual gatherings with friends. They looked like the kind of couple people pointed at and whispered about in admiration. Stable, balanced, unproblematic, from the outside. Their marriage felt complete, almost untouchable. Inside their home, life followed familiar rhythms. Late at night, after long workdays, they would sit on the couch with the lights dimmed, talking about nothing and everything at once. Sometimes it was about dreams they hadn't chased yet. Sometimes it was just laughter over an inside joke no one else would ever understand. Dinner was rarely rushed. Even on busy days, they ate together, sharing food, sharing silence, sharing the comfort of routine. Ion believed these small rituals were proof of something solid, something worth protecting. He had always been that way, patient, steady, loyal to the idea that love wasn't loud, but consistent. To him, commitment meant staying even when things felt slightly off, especially then. But slowly, almost invisibly, things began to change. Sarah started spending more time on her phone, always placing it face down on the table the moment he entered the room. At first, Ion didn't question it. Everyone deserved privacy, he told himself. Trust meant not counting footsteps or checking screens. Yet the warmth in her voice began to fade. Conversations that once flowed easily now ended quickly. Her laughter came faster, but it no longer reached her eyes. She began dressing differently, more carefully, more deliberately. New clothes appeared, longer nights out with friends, a sudden interest in places she'd never mentioned before. When Ion asked, she smiled and brushed it off, calling it self-care, calling it growth. He nodded, choosing understanding over suspicion. Still, unease crept in during the quiet moments, the kind of unease that sat heavy in the chest but refused to explain itself. Sometimes, lying in bed beside her, Ion felt a distance that had nothing to do with space. Her body was there, her presence wasn't. He considered asking directly, considered pushing, but every time, he stopped himself. Love, he believed, was about endurance, about patience, about not turning doubt into accusation too quickly. So he stayed quiet. He watched, he waited. And the night he noticed her smile at a message she didn't share, a feeling settled deep within him, sharp, unfamiliar, undeniable. Something was wrong. He said nothing. I didn't know then that silence was already being used against me. The changes didn't arrive all at once. They slipped in quietly, hiding behind excuses that sounded reasonable enough to believe. Sarah started coming home later than usual, her keys jingling softly past midnight. Some nights she didn't come home at all, sending a short message about crashing at a friend's place or working late. Ion read those texts and replied with understanding words he wasn't fully feeling yet. When he asked how her day went, her tone had changed, shorter, sharper. Conversations that once lingered now ended abruptly. She seemed distracted, as if her mind was somewhere else entirely. When he tried to bridge the distance, she pulled back just enough to make him question himself. "You're imagining things," she said one evening when he mentioned how distant she felt. Another time she sighed and shook her head. "You're too sensitive lately. Not everything is about you." The words stayed with him longer than they should have. Ion had always trusted her, and now he found himself wondering if the problem was him. Maybe stress was getting to him. Maybe he was reading too much into harmless changes. Love, after all, wasn't supposed to feel like interrogation. Still, patterns began forming where coincidences used to be. Names appeared in her conversations, names he didn't recognize. She mentioned them casually, never giving details. When her phone buzzed, she smiled instinctively before checking who it was, then quickly masked it. That smile felt unfamiliar. It wasn't the one she shared with him during late-night talks or quiet dinners. It belonged to someone else. Her laughter changed too. It was lighter, freer, and never directed his way anymore. Sometimes she laughed at messages while sitting right beside him, turning the screen away just enough. Ion pretended not to notice, but each time felt like a small cut he couldn't explain. Inside, a battle took shape. One side of him clung to trust, reminding him of the years they had built together. Accusations without proof could destroy what still existed. The other side whispered that intuition didn't appear without reason, that discomfort was often truth trying to speak. He chose silence again, not because he was blind, but because he hoped clarity would come on its own. Then one night, as Sarah stepped into the balcony to take a call she thought he couldn't hear, Ion caught a few words carried by the quiet air. Her voice was softer than he'd heard it in months, intimate, almost playful. She laughed and said a name that definitely wasn't his. That's when I realized, this wasn't accidental. Ion didn't go looking for the truth. He wasn't digging through messages or following her around like a stranger. The truth came to him on an ordinary evening, disguised as coincidence. Sarah had left her laptop open on the dining table while she stepped into the shower. A notification blinked on the screen, brief, careless, unmistakably intimate. He froze where he stood, his heart slowing instead of racing. He read just enough to understand, not details, not dates, just enough to know that this wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction. It was real, ongoing, comfortable. When Sarah returned, wrapped in a towel, she saw his face and instantly knew. There was no panic in her eyes, no scramble for excuses. She didn't ask what he'd seen. She simply sighed, as if a long-delayed conversation had finally arrived. "I was going to tell you," she said casually, pulling clothes from the wardrobe. Her tone wasn't apologetic. It was relieved. Ion waited for remorse, for guilt, for fear. It never came. Instead, she sat across from him and spoke with unsettling confidence. She talked about how she felt alive again, how exciting it was to be wanted differently. She didn't cry. She didn't lower her voice. It was almost as if she expected him to understand. Then she crossed a line he didn't know existed. "He listens better than you ever did," she said, meeting his eyes without hesitation. "And honestly, he makes me feel things you stopped trying to." The words landed hard, hollowing something inside him. That single sentence erased years of shared memories, reduced them to an inconvenience. It wasn't just betrayal, it was comparison, replacement. Ion didn't shout. He didn't ask questions. Something inside him shut down so cleanly it scared him. The anger never arrived. Neither did tears. There was only a heavy stillness, like a door quietly closing. He realized then that she wasn't confessing out of guilt. She was boasting, testing how much truth he could absorb without breaking. And in that moment, he saw her clearly not as his wife, but as someone already standing halfway out the door. The room felt unfamiliar. The woman across from him felt distant. The life he thought he was living felt borrowed. In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I felt replaceable. And the most dangerous thing wasn't what she said, it was how little it seemed to matter to her. But I didn't say a word. After the truth surfaced, Sarah didn't retreat. She expanded. It was as if admitting the affair had freed her from restraint. She spoke more openly now, dropping hints without shame, answering late-night calls in front of him without stepping away. Sometimes she smiled at her phone and didn't even bother to hide it. The secrecy was gone, replaced by confidence. She assumed control had shifted in her favor. Ion noticed how she watched him, waiting for an explosion that never came. She expected anger, jealousy, begging anything that would confirm she still mattered enough to hurt him. When none of it arrived, she seemed almost amused. She mistook his silence for helplessness, his calm for defeat. "You're taking this surprisingly well," she said one night, leaning against the kitchen counter. There was something smug in her voice, something testing. He didn't answer, not because he had nothing to say, but because words suddenly felt unnecessary. Inside him, something fundamental had changed. The pain didn't disappear, but it sharpened. It organized his thoughts. What once felt like confusion turned into clarity. He stopped asking questions he already knew the answers to. Stopped trying to understand behavior that no longer deserved explanation. Silence became deliberate. He moved differently now. He listened without reacting. He observed without confronting. Every brag, every careless mention of him, every moment of disrespect confirmed what his heart had already accepted. This marriage wasn't broken, it was abandoned. Sarah mistook this quiet for permission. She talked freely, convinced he was too invested, too loyal, too weak to walk away. She believed history would trap him, that comfort would outweigh dignity, that love, no matter how wounded, would keep him in place. But what she didn't see was the shift behind his eyes. Ion wasn't staying because he didn't know what to do. He was staying because he was deciding how to leave without losing himself. The man who once believed patience could fix everything now understood something harsher. Tolerance without boundaries invites disrespect. He began to detach in small, invisible ways. He slept earlier, spoke less, laughed no longer. Each emotional thread he cut was quiet, clean, irreversible. And with every day that passed, the weight on his chest grew lighter, not because the pain faded, but because it finally made sense. Sarah felt the distance but misread it completely. She thought she had won. Thought his calm meant acceptance. Thought his silence meant surrender. She never asked where his thoughts had gone. She never noticed when hope left the room. And while she believed she held all the power, Ion made a private decision, one that would change everything. That's when I started preparing to leave. Ion didn't announce his next move. He didn't threaten, didn't warn, didn't ask for permission. While Sarah continued living as if nothing could truly change, he began acting with quiet precision. One afternoon during his lunch break, he stepped into a small law office across the city. No drama, no anger, just paperwork and clarity. The lawyer spoke in measured terms: options, timelines, consequences. Ion listened carefully, feeling something steady return to his spine. At home, life looked the same on the surface, but underneath, everything shifted. He separated his finances first. Accounts were reorganized. Automatic payments were adjusted, not as punishment, just protection. He stopped funding shared comforts that only benefited her. He stopped explaining his choices. He stopped asking for understanding. Emotionally, he withdrew with the same discipline. When Sarah talked, he listened politely, offering neutral responses that gave her nothing to push against. No jealousy, no wounded expressions, no anger to feed on. The absence of reaction confused her more than rage ever could. She noticed, of course, the change was impossible to miss. "You've been really quiet lately," she said one evening, watching him from across the room. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he replied, calmly. In for the first time, it was true. Sarah laughed it off, assuming it was another phase. She believed his loyalty ran deeper than his pride. She believed he needed her more than she needed him. When he didn't respond to her teasing or probing, she filled the silence with confidence. "You're not really going anywhere," she said once, half joking, half assured. "We've been through worse." Ion didn't correct her. Days passed, then weeks. He packed small things when she wasn't home. Important documents, personal belongings, items that mattered only to him. Each step felt controlled, deliberate, almost surgical. There was no satisfaction in it, just resolve. The moment came quietly. One evening, Sarah noticed a folder on the table, legal papers, his name printed clearly at the top. She picked them up, scanning quickly, then more carefully. Her expression shifted not to anger, not yet, but to disbelief. "This isn't serious," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded thinner than usual. "You're just trying to scare me." Ion met her eyes, calm and unmoved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain. He simply watched as certainty drained from her face. The laughter faded. Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the papers. That was the first time she realized something irreversible was happening. She laughed. Until she couldn't. Sarah didn't sleep that night. By morning, the confidence she wore so easily had fractured into something restless and sharp. She waited for Ion, pacing the living room, rehearsing arguments that no longer fit the situation. When he finally sat across from her, calm and unreadable, she realized this wasn't another conversation she could control. "What are you doing?" she demanded, trying to sound firm. "You can't just decide this on your own." Ion looked at her for a long moment before speaking. When he did, his voice was steady, stripped of emotion. "I didn't decide suddenly," he said. "I decided when you stopped respecting me. That was all. No accusations. No raised voice. Just truth." Something in her expression shifted. The charm faded. The certainty drained. She tried to push back, to regain ground, but the balance had already changed. The man in front of her wasn't asking for understanding anymore. He was informing her. Later that day, reality began closing in. She reached out to the other man, the one she had spoken about so proudly, so confidently. The messages went unanswered at first. Then replies grew shorter, colder. When she mentioned problems, consequences, real-life responsibility, he vanished completely. Calls went straight to voicemail. Promises dissolved into silence. Panic crept in where excitement once lived. That evening, Sarah sat across from Ion again, this time smaller, quieter. "He's just busy," she said weakly, more to herself than to him. Her voice cracked when she realized how unconvincing it sounded. Ion said nothing. The absence of reaction terrified her. She was used to arguments, to tears, to emotion she could manipulate. Calm was unfamiliar territory. It offered no leverage. Her words tumbled out next, apologies wrapped in fear, explanations that arrived too late. She blamed stress, loneliness, confusion, anything but herself. The woman who once bragged now searched his face desperately, hoping for something, anger, sadness, longing that would mean she still mattered. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "We can fix this." Ion listened, not because he was considering it, but because he no longer needed to interrupt. When she finished, he stood up, his decision clear in the way he moved. "I hope you learn from this," he said quietly. "But I won't stay to watch you change." Her breath hitched. The reality she had avoided finally settled in. The control she believed she had was gone. The safety she mocked was disappearing. And for the first time, she reached for him not with pride, but desperation. The one who bragged now begged, "But I had already made peace." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling as she folded them over each other. The apartment, once familiar and warm, felt empty in a way that mirrored her own realization. She looked up at Ion, eyes red from crying, voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry," she began, stumbling over the words. "I didn't mean to. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words were fragmented, raw, desperate. She tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to offer a future that no longer existed. "I promise I'll change. I can fix this. I can be the wife you deserve." Ion listened. He could hear the trembling in her voice, the sharp intake of breath between sobs, the way her eyes pleaded for something she had already lost. And yet, he felt no anger, no desire to retaliate. The fire that could have consumed him months ago had cooled, replaced with something quieter, stronger, clarity. He acknowledged her pain silently, understanding that her regret was genuine now, but timing, he realized, mattered more than sincerity. He didn't need to scold her or make her feel smaller. Life had already done that. He didn't need to argue, because words could no longer repair what her actions had broken. "I hear you," he said finally, his voice steady, calm. "I understand you're sorry, but some things, they can't be undone." Sarah flinched. She reached out, half expecting him to grab her hand, to stay, to forgive. But he didn't. He had made his choice the moment he accepted the truth. He stood, moving with a quiet confidence that was nothing like the man she had underestimated for so long. "I've loved you," he continued, "but I can't stay where respect has been replaced with betrayal. I hope you truly learn from this." She nodded, tears spilling freely now, realizing fully that the safety net she had taken for granted no longer existed. Her apologies, her promises, all arrived after the bridge had been crossed. She had begged for something that could no longer be returned. Ion walked toward the door, suitcase in hand. Each step was deliberate, not fueled by anger, but by self-respect. There was no glance back, no last-minute plea to linger. Just movement forward, toward dignity, toward peace. As the door clicked softly behind him, he felt the weight lift. Pain still lingered, but it was tempered by acceptance. Some lessons are learned too late, some apologies come too late, and some love ends not with rage, but with clarity. Some apologies arrive after love has left. If there's one thing I've learned through this, it's that love without boundaries is nothing but an invitation to betrayal. I spent years believing that loyalty meant enduring everything silently, that patience would be enough to hold a relationship together. I thought as long as I stayed calm, stayed steady, and stayed faithful, nothing could break us. I was wrong. Boundaries aren't punishments, they are protections. They are the line between respect and abuse, between love and being taken for granted. And when that line is crossed, no amount of devotion can fix what's been broken. I also learned that silence is not weakness. So many times, people expect you to react, to shout, to cry, to give them the satisfaction of seeing you break. They think calmness is vulnerability. They think patience is submission. But quiet observation, careful decisions, and measured responses, these are the weapons of someone who knows their worth. I could have screamed, I could have begged, I could have thrown accusations like daggers. Instead, I chose silence. And that silence wasn't empty, it was power. It allowed me to see clearly, to understand who she really was, and to act without losing myself in anger. Self-respect is non-negotiable. That's the lesson I had to learn the hardest. Walking away wasn't easy, and it wasn't fun. There were moments when my heart ached more than I thought possible, but staying would have meant surrendering my dignity. It would have meant letting someone redefine my value for their own amusement. Self-respect doesn't ask permission, and it doesn't apologize. It simply guides you to do what is right for you, even when it hurts. I won't lie, this journey was painful. The moments of betrayal cut deep. The casual bragging, the comparisons, the arrogance of someone who thought love was theirs to toy with, they left scars. But pain has a strange way of teaching clarity. It showed me what mattered, what didn't, and who I truly was when no one else was cheering for me. The moment I chose myself, I found a freedom that fear and anger could never provide. Now, I want to turn to you. Have you ever stayed loyal while someone tested how much you'd tolerate? Have you ever been mistaken as weak just because you stayed calm? Have you ever realized that love alone isn't enough if respect is missing? If you've ever walked away to protect your dignity, to save yourself from someone else's recklessness, I want to hear your story. Share it, write it in the comments. Someone reading this right now needs to know they are not alone. They need proof that calmness, patience, and self-respect are strengths, not weaknesses. We all deserve relationships where boundaries are honored, where loyalty is returned, and where love doesn't come at the cost of our worth. If this story resonates, if it hits close to home, speak up. Let your voice remind someone else that walking away isn't failure, it's courage. Let your story inspire them to choose themselves, too. Because in the end, silence, clarity, and self-respect are far louder than words ever could be.